Hello, I'm Alan West, and on today's Next Generation Preview, we're going to take a look at the unfolding power struggle taking place in northern Africa right now. Some people call that the Maghreb, in which well-trained and well-armed Islamic insurgents are responsible for a deadly hostage situation in Algeria and in neighboring Mali. Islamic radicals that control over half of that northern part of that country in the once stable democratic nation of Mali are looking to extend their power south. As the international crisis unfolds, French President Francois Hollande ordered airstrikes on Mali's Islamic strongholds in the north. And now French troops and troops from neighboring countries in Africa are on the ground as well. Joining me today to walk us through the global implications of this conflict is a dear and close friend, Frank Gaffney, the director of the Center for Security Policy. Welcome to you, Frank.
Colonel, I know I can now revert to what I prefer as your title. Thank you very much for having me, and congratulations on this terrific new program. I pray it will be successful in reaching that next generation.
Thanks so much, Frank. Now, can you bring us up to speed on what you see happening with this hostage situation and some of these demands that we understand that the rebels are making?
Well, can I back the lens up for a moment just to say we're in this fix in part because of policies the Obama administration has been pursuing, I'm sorry to say, throughout North Africa, and for that matter, the Middle East as well, namely of engaging Islamists. And by that engaging, I mean everything from legitimating them to empowering them, to funding them in some cases, to arming them in some cases, certainly to emboldening them. And most immediately, this has been evident, of course, in Libya, where we participated, albeit, as they came to say, by leading from behind in the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. That set in train the unleashing, talk about Pandora's boxes, the unleashing of not only Islamist furies, but the caches of arms that Muammar Gaddafi had spread all over his country, some of which armed the troops that went into Mali, these Islamists, jihadists, who took over, as you say, the northern part of the country, and are now threatening what's left of it. The French have stepped in, as you say, and I think what's going down now is the beginning of a horrible war, probably across this region, that will involve not just the French, but the West's interests very generally, much more generally as well.
Well, do you see a little bit of the unintended consequences of not really understanding what the Arab Spring meant to the toppling of these quote-unquote stable democracies? I mean, we see Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood running things now. We see Libya. Of course, it wasn't a stable democracy, but there's more instability. And now we see the same thing happen in Mali. Is this the unintended consequence of the failure of understanding the Arab Spring?
Yeah, Arab Spring, of course, was kind of the name that was given to one particular phenomenon. I would argue, Alan, that the failure is broader than that. It's a failure to understand what Islamism is about, what Sharia, the doctrine that animates it, is about. And as a result, we've been on the wrong side since Obama came to power, and frankly, to some extent, under Bush as well. And the process have encouraged the conviction that these Islamists have that it's God's will that they will triumph. They will impose this Sharia doctrine over everybody else. That was done under the rubric of Arab Spring. It was now, I think we're seeing increasingly, fraud. It was always simply a revolutionary circumstance that, as is true of almost all revolutions, exploited by the most organized, the most disciplined, and the most ruthless. And in most of these cases, Egypt for sure, Libya for sure, Tunisia in due course, I'm sure, Yemen, and so on, that typically is the Islamists or the Muslim Brotherhood specifically.
I want to play a clip of President Obama on the campaign trail just this past November, and he said this.
Thanks to the service and sacrifice of our brave men and women in uniform, the war in Iraq is over. The war in Afghanistan is winding down. Al-Qaeda has been decimated.
Now, Frank, I got to tell you, having spent 22 years in the United States military, they always taught us in our strategic studies that there are only two ways to end a war. You win or you lose. And just 2 months ago, for the president to say that al-Qaeda is decimated, where do you see this link between these forces we have and this new entity that has probably been there all along, al-Qaeda in the Maghreb?
Well, I've always found to be misleading at best the president's characterization of the enemy we're fighting as al-Qaeda. As you know, Alan, it's much broader than that. It's Islamists of various stripes. They have the same goals. They may have different techniques, but I would include the Muslim Brotherhood as well. Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb is just the latest franchise to develop out of this Islamist populace. And it is, unfortunately, I think, as are the Islamists elsewhere, being greatly encouraged by what they sense is not only the rising power and influence of their team, but the declining power and influence and will of ours. And so what we've got is a president who campaigned on the, well, frankly, deceptive line that al-Qaeda is on the path to defeat, as he also said, which, first of all, mischaracterized the problem, and second of all, certainly mischaracterized our progress. And now those chickens are coming home to roost, and candidly, we ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah. Well, the Malian Foreign Minister Koulibaly, said that it was necessary, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, it was necessary to mobilize the entire international community, and that what is happening in Mali is a global threat. Remember what happened on September the 11th? It is that terrorism can happen anywhere, at any moment, to anyone. And when you look at this, you know, I'm starting to see a lot of parallels to what happened in Afghanistan, where we trained some members of the Mali army and their leaders, and now they have defected and gone over. The exact same thing somewhat happened with Afghanistan, where we trained the Mujahideen, and then we see later on how that flipped on us, and to include the ISI. So, Frank, right now, what do you see as our options? And do you agree with there's some parallels to some previous instances in that part of the world?
I do. There are parallels that are even more immediate, to be honest with you. What we're doing in Syria at the moment, I believe, is arming, certainly helping to underwrite and otherwise politically legitimate Islamists who are really not that different from the ones that we're now fighting or helping the French fight in Mali, and certainly confronting in a lot of other places besides. And this is what, again, going back to what we talked about a moment ago, Alan, is the disconnect of this administration. It's now talking about fighting, these Islamist insurgents, that they can't be allowed to take over a country. Well, they've got Mali now, an area the size of France or Texas. That's only a piece of this broader front that's opened up. What we're about to do, if the president has his way, is turn over Syria, a country that is arguably even more strategic than is the country of Mali in North Africa, and its chemical weapons, and its biological weapons, and heavens knows what else, to Islamists who are virtually indistinguishable from the guys we're confronting in Mali. Notably, this outfit called Al-Nusra. As you know, Alan, this is a group of al-Qaeda-affiliated jihadists in Syria that the United States State Department actually designated as a terrorist group recently, only to have the entire rest of the Syrian opposition, the people that we're trying to bring to power instead of Bashar Assad, say, oh, no, we're all al-Nusra. Don't you dare somehow try to isolate or eliminate those guys. This is the problem. We've been failing to understand that the Islamists, not all Muslims, as you know, Alan, the ones that are adhering to Sharia are the problem, I would argue, not the ones who don't. But the ones who want to impose this repressive, brutally totalitarian system on everybody, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, and not just in these areas, but worldwide, are our enemies. We've got to get that clear, and we've got to resist it comprehensively.
Well, Frank, I got to tell you, I'm very concerned about this. And real quickly, briefly, I'd like to touch on what Leon Panetta just said.
The administration takes this very seriously, and they have indeed been reviewing areas where assistance can be provided, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to provide that assistance. Frankly, we already are providing assistance in terms of information to them to try to help in this effort. So, we are going to be taking steps to provide assistance to them. And with regards to AQIM, with regards to Al-Qaeda in general, I guess, I say this from my own background in having dealt with Al-Qaeda. They are a threat.
Frank, quickly, because we're running out of time, Leon Panetta is departing as the Secretary of Defense. We know that Chuck Hagel has been nominated for Secretary of Defense. We know that Mr. John Brennan is being nominated for Director of the CIA. Real quickly, is this the right team for the national security of the United States of America to ensure the security for our next generation?
I don't think so, Alan. I would add John Kerry to that list. I believe that these are people who I would characterize as post-Americans. I think that they are not up to this job of dealing with this mortal threat abroad or at home. John Brennan having been principally responsible, I think, for helping to empower the Islamists in our own country, and not least to blind us to the threat that they represent. This is very much the wrong team, and the next generation, I fear, will reap the whirlwind if ours doesn't get this right.
Thank you for talking with me today, Frank, and safe travels to you, and I look forward to seeing you up in D.C.
I look forward to it too, sir. Thank you very much, Colonel.